Welcome to episode 24 of the Perrysburg Podcast. I'm your host and Perrysburg resident, Kim Newlove. The Perrysburg Podcast is an informational podcast for three groups of listeners. We've got prospective residents who are considering a move to Perrysburg, new residents who have just moved here and been here less than 12 months, and current Perrysburg residents who have been here more than a year. We talk about what's in Perrysburg and why people like to live here. You can find the show notes for this episode on perrysburgpodcast.com. Again, this is episode 24. Today's episode is an interview with Perrysburg resident Lorenzo Melchor. Lorenzo, his wife Andria, and their children Mateo and Lillian have lived in Perrysburg since 2013. But Lorenzo had strong ties to this community prior to moving here. Lorenzo is a 2003 graduate of Perrysburg High School. He has also coached football in Perrysburg for 13 years, including the last 5 as a varsity coach. Over the years, Lorenzo has also coached baseball, softball, track, and basketball. Lorenzo works full-time right now as the Park Services Supervisor at Glass City Metropark, where he has been employed for more than 3.5 years. Lorenzo is also a podcaster, which is so cool. We will be geeking out about that in just a minute. He has 2 podcasts at this time. They are the Nerdball Podcast and 3 Different Dads. You'll hear more about those podcasts during the first half of our interview. When Lorenzo is not podcasting, coaching, or working at the park, he enjoys spending time with his wife Andria and their 2 children, Mateo and Lillian. This is my first time focusing an interview on what brought a Perrysburg resident to town and why they like to live here. I'm excited that Lorenzo, a fellow podcaster and really nice guy, is the first. We'll start off talking about podcasting, then move into what brought him to Perrysburg, why he likes to live here, and then at the end, we're going to talk about what prospective, new, and current Perrysburg, Ohio residents should know about this town. Without further ado, here is my interview with Lorenzo Melchor. Hi, Lorenzo. Welcome to the Perrysburg Podcast. How are you?
Great, Kim. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's always fun to interview another podcaster. I don't think I've done that here on the Perrysburg Podcast yet, so you get to be the first.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Yeah, I've only been interviewed once before. That was for the Hive, the podcast that the high school kids do for Perrysburg High School. So, but it is, I always tell everyone when I ask them to come on my podcast, like everyone likes to talk about themselves. They just don't know it, and it's true. Like I felt that like, this is cool to be asked questions when normally I ask people questions.
Yes, you are on, what do they say? The other side of the mic right now? Yeah, you're on the other side of the mic. Yeah, your podcast is the Nerdball Podcast, right?
Correct.
Would you like
Yep.
to talk about that first? Might as well.
Sure. The Nerdball Podcast, I've been doing it for over 3 years now, over 200 episodes. It started with me and a buddy. It was totally different than what it is now. It was me and my friend just would sit and I'd talk about sports. He would talk about movies, TV, video games, that kind of stuff, and we'd kind of talk about each other's world. He couldn't do it anymore, and I wanted to keep doing it, so I morphed it into just interviews with people. And that's what it's turned into. It's turned into really good interviews, conversations with people I know, strangers. It's been really fun. It's been something that I've tried to keep going. There's been hiatuses. Usually for whatever reason, June is pretty busy for me, for our family. That's when usually high school football starts. Then baseball and softball. My daughter does baton, so it gets pretty busy in June, and that's usually just now I know plan to just to take it off. But it's something I really enjoy, and I'm lucky that my family allows me the time to sit in my basement and chat with people.
Awesome. Well, thank you for chatting with me today. This is fun.
Oh yeah.
If there's somebody out there who has never heard the Nerdball Podcast, what is a recent episode that they absolutely have to listen to?
I've had some pretty good ones, and I have some good ones coming up. I think one I had actually just came out today. Well, I don't know when you're putting this out, but came out on the 21st of December, was the chief prosecutor for Perrysburg. Her name is China Pfeiffer. She was on, and she talked a lot about like like she has like a mini farm and her children, and then she talked about being a chief prosecutor, and it's cool because this is the city that I live in, and wanting to know all this information. It was really cool. A lot of good conversation because not everyone likes to talk about police and how they police, and everyone thinks they're all good or all bad. So it was a good like back and forth understanding like processes and how she goes about stuff, and like I said, just finding out information. And that's what these episodes are. Like for me, it's finding out information. Like I want people to enjoy the episodes, but if I'm also not enjoying like finding all this information, then if I don't like it, then why am I going to put it out for other people to like it? So, but lucky for me, I guess I'm nosy and I like to know a bunch of information. So
I would say you're curious and you
yeah.
just want to learn more about people. I think that's a good thing to be curious, coming from
Yeah.
a point of curiosity instead of judgment. That's always, I think, preferred over judgment. Yeah, be curious. Did you just say that she has a mini farm?
Well, I call it a mini farm, but she has like, I think she has chickens. She has a pet pig. She talked about having, I think she had a pet possum at one point, and she has dogs and cats and stuff, and yeah, so she has a bunch of animals that she takes care of, and she doesn't, we'll say, dispose of wild animals even if they're causes a nuisance. She'll find other ways to let them live, but somewhere else.
Got it. Now, the name of your podcast is the Nerdball Podcast. How did you come up with that name?
I almost had to fit it to what the podcast is now, because before, that's what it was original, was the Nerdball Podcast, because I like sports, so that's the ball part, and my buddy like it was into like nerd, quote unquote nerd culture, which is movies, video games, that kind of stuff. So we've put them together and created Nerdball. The problem is Nerdball is kind of a term out there in the sports world. Mostly basketball is kind of a term they use, but there was no the Nerdball Podcast, so it worked out for us that was available, so that's what we went with. And then as the podcast grew to just me interviewing people, I kind of morphed it into, the first question I always ask everyone is, what are you nerding out about? What is something you into, a hobby? So it kind of turned into that. That's kind of how I use it now. I didn't want to change the name. I like the name, but now it still kind of fits on what I'm doing.
Thank you for sharing that, because it almost sounds like that prosecutor. Isn't that who you said you interviewed about? And she
Yeah.
happens to have that mini farm. She might have been nerding out about mini farms, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's what's great about that first question. I think it's important because some people, I asked someone today. I went to my chiropractor and I asked one of the front desk women, and I said, "Do you want to come on?" She asked me about the podcast. I go, "Do you want to come on?" She goes, "I don't know what I want to talk about." I go, "Everybody says that." I go, "That's my job, though. My job is to get the information out of you. Like that's what I'm supposed to do." And I told her, like, this is the first thing I ask is this, because it's a jumping off point to whatever we talk about. Sometimes episodes are half the episode is what they're nerding out about because I'm really interested in it, or they're super interested in it. Sometimes it's the whole episode. It just depends on how it goes. But I told her, I was like, it's kind of a jumping off point, and and it's important to me to have work-life balance. So like, what do you do to get out of the daily grind? Or it sounds bad, but like if you have 4 children, like what can you do to be away from that for a little bit? Like you should still need time to yourself. Even if it's, I told her, even if it's 10 minutes a day, hey, this is the time from 8 to 8:10 is when mom does her Sudoku or whatever. Like something that that she can do just for herself.
Are you trying to reveal something about your wife? Does she do Sudoku?
No, she has no hobbies. So
Oh,
I get
no.
I get on her for that. She says her kids are her hobbies. I go, that's not, no. Your kids are your kids. That's your mom. That's not a hobby.
Oh, I know. We moms, we tend to find more work to do if we get any free time at all. We have to create boundaries because nobody creates them for us. I respect your wife, as she's probably a wonderful mom, and
Oh yeah.
therefore she does call her kids her hobby. I get it. Yeah.
Especially now because our house is full of sick people and she's been taking care of everybody. So I
Oh,
told
God
her
bless her.
I call my mom and she's gonna watch our children on Saturday so I can take her out to dinner because our house has just been full of germs.
Hopefully everybody gets well soon,
Oh,
because
thank you.
as we record this, it is December 21st and the Christmas holiday's coming. So
Yeah.
hopefully everybody's healthy and ready for Santa.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're on the way.
Awesome. Anything else you want to share about podcasting?
I do have another podcast called Three Different Dads. That's kind of it's a easy one to do because it's me and my buddies Tyler and Jimmy, who are both from Perrysburg. One still lives in Perrysburg, and one now lives in Dallas. We'll be releasing our 50th episode next week, so I'm looking forward to that. Again, Three Different Dads. We just three goofball dads talk about dad stuff. So that's that's pretty much all it is.
Good for you. I'll have to get links to those and put those in the show notes so people can check those out. And you can find the show notes on perrysburgpodcast.com.
Yeah, thank you. One more thing about podcasting, real quick.
Yes.
I did mention it on one of the episodes of Three Different Dads, but if you just like want to build a better relationship with some of your friends, that's the way to do it. And you don't even have to, maybe you don't even put the episodes out, because I'll tell you what, the buddy that lives in Perrysburg, like we talked every once in a while. And that my friend Jim that lives in Dallas, we didn't talk at all, maybe texted once every 2 or 3 weeks. But now we set aside an hour every week to talk to each other. And it's fun. And we make sure everyone's aware of what's happening in our life, and we make fun of each other and help each other. And and it's everything's personal, because we're so involved with each other, and we put everything out there for whoever's listening. And Jimmy, his mom's going through end of life right now, and she interacts with the podcast too, and he just lets it all out there, talks all about it. So now every episode we end with telling each other that we love each other. So it turned into like something way more than I thought it was just going to be a podcast. Like, it really helped our friendship just like become this thing. And if, like I said, if you already have friends with people in your circle, and you would like to be like, we want to get together more, but it's hard, it's expensive, or this or that, just set up a Zoom call once a week if you can, and just chat with people.
Oh, I love what you were talking about because some people think that if you start a podcast, you have to somehow monetize it. And
Yeah.
that's not true. You can
Yeah.
get paid in fun. And
Mhm.
that's what I hear you saying. You're enjoying what you're doing.
Oh, it's so much fun. It's one of those things, like, if you love your job, you wake up sometimes you can be like, oh, I don't want to go to work. And then you're there like, oh, good, I'm glad I came, or whatever. Same with the podcast. Like, I know I got a podcast on Sunday morning. I got a podcast with these two people. It's going to be 2 hours. I got to do it though, because I got to put episodes out. And then once you start doing it, you're just like, oh man, I'm so glad. And then you get into it. And before long, you're like, oh, the first episode's an hour and 15. I got to end this. I got another one in 15 minutes, like same thing with those guys. Like, it might be early. We all have children, and it might be early on a Sunday. And sometimes we can hear our kids playing in the background, but that's just part of it. And it is fun. Like, that's the main reason we're doing this. And that's why I tell them it is a running joke of us ever starting a Patreon or getting paid or anything. So it is a joke that's what we want. But in the end, like, we know we have fun with each other, and we just like talking to each other once a week.
I love that. That's great. That's such a pure thing. You're doing it because you really enjoy it.
Yeah.
One thing that people may not know about podcasting is that there's no set rules, meaning you can have your own why. And it just sounds like your why for doing that one is just so you guys can get together, keep the relationship going, and there doesn't have to be a time limit on it. So, anybody that's interested in podcasting, if you've got an inkling and you want to try it, give it a try. Be a guest, maybe on the
Yeah.
Nerdball podcast, or create your own and have something with your friends. I always like to encourage pharmacists to start podcasts because I am a pharmacist by training. And I think we have a lot of great advice in us and good stories too. If you want a podcast, go on and do it.
Yeah, yeah, it's great fun. And I do have a couple pharmacist questions. I don't know where those will fit in this thing, but I just went to the pharmacy, and then I was like, oh, I had just a couple of funny questions that popped in my head.
If they're general and this is not a HIPAA violation, lay it
100%
on
general.
me.
No, 100% general.
Okay.
I got an antibiotic yesterday, amoxicillin and something else. Why are they so gigantic? Like, they're huge pills. I mean, you could take super tiny
Yeah.
small pills, and why are these things so big?
I know that those are huge. It's probably amoxicillin and clavulanate, 875.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I don't know why that one's so big. It is gigantic, and it's actually usually scored in the middle, meaning there's a little line in it.
Yeah.
So you can actually snap it in half and take one half at a time.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm sorry that you're finding that difficult.
I had no issues with it, but I told my wife, I go, this thing's huge. She goes, yep, but she does medical stuff, or she works kind of in the medical field. So it's like, yep, that's what it is. I was like, all right, sorry. Just
All
take it
right.
and shut up.
That sounds like something a woman would say.
Yeah.
Quit your whining. Okay, I don't want to give myself a bad reputation here, so let's move
No,
on.
you're good. You're good. Sorry.
Let's talk about Perrysburg, shall
Yes,
we?
yes.
I like to ask people, what's in Perrysburg and why do you like to live here? So let's find out for you. What brought you to Perrysburg? What's in Perrysburg that brought you here?
I originally came to Perrysburg in 2000. My parents, we lived in Toledo. I grew up in Toledo until 8th grade, and my dad moved us here when I was a freshman. My brother was 4 years older than me, and then I have two younger sisters. So I think what happened is I graduated 8th grade. My sister finished so she can graduate 8th grade, and my sister stayed at our Catholic school so she could get first communion. And then everyone came over, but he didn't want to pay for 4 Catholic high schools, so he's like, "We're moving to somewhere with good schools." So we moved to Perrysburg, and it was a big culture shock for me because I went to a small Catholic school where I had about 285 kids in my entire school from kindergarten to 8th grade, and 13 kids in my 8th grade class. And then I was a freshman, and I had over 300 kids in my freshman class. And I had to dress myself. Like I was wearing a uniform every day. So that was another thing I wasn't used to, wearing my own clothes or picking it out. That was the reason we came here. And, I made a lot of friends. Luckily, there was like 4 houses in our brand new neighborhood, and the house right next door was like another kid who was a freshman. So he became one of my really good friends, and all through high school. And I enjoyed it here. It was fun. I made friends, like I said, made friends real quick, and was able to, navigate high school, especially being a new kid, navigate high school pretty easily. And once I got out of high school, and I really didn't go anywhere. I lived in BG for a couple years, and I lived in when I met my now wife. One of those years was with her. Then we bought a house in Toledo, our first house when we were married, and then eventually we made our way back to Perrysburg. We knew, like, once we were going to have kids, like, we want to go back to Perrysburg. Both our parents live here. In fact, my in-laws live 3 houses down from our house. So that's been pretty cool for my kids. But during COVID, it's makes me sad and happy at the same time, because there's pictures that pop up where my daughter, she was 6, I think. She's like, "I want to go to Nana Pop." So she walked over there and just sat on the front porch and talked to them, because it was COVID and no one knew what was going to happen or anything. So there's a picture of her just sitting on the front porch talking to her grandma and grandpa. But it's cool that they get that. And then my parents live 5 minutes across town. So it's nice to have everybody here. As much as I know people get upset, maybe upset's a strong word, but I know people are like, "Man, Perrysburg's getting big. It's getting too big, this and that." Not to me. Like, it still feels small to me. I think it's getting big in the spaces that it can be big, like down Route 20. There's space for that, for restaurants and other things. And all the center of Perrysburg, the tree streets and the number streets, that's all the same. That's all staying the same. And if that's what you like about Perrysburg, you can still have that. And I don't feel like it's too big or getting too big. It's to me, it still feels kind of small.
Thanks for sharing your story. It sounds like what is in Perrysburg for you is schools and family. Is that right?
100%. Yeah. Especially family. Families is super important. Having people here just like I said earlier, like, I want to go out to dinner, and I want to know if someone can watch our children. I'm sure you're the same way. When your kids were younger, I'm either going to leave them with a relative that I trust, or a babysitter who's probably not a stranger, but it's a babysitter who's not a relative. You still feel pretty good about the babysitter, but you feel a lot better when it's their grandma or grandpa. They might give them more sugar than the babysitter does, but you know, that's the way it is.
That's their job. Grandparents sugar them up and send them home, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I had to learn that too. When my son was born, probably a couple years after that, my mom was like, "You can't be putting so many rules on me. You just gotta let me be a grandma." I said, "You're right, you're right." And I'm trying to make her be a parent again. That's not her job anymore.
You and I have a similar story. I know that you came from Toledo when you were under the 8th grade, like
Hmm.
getting ready to go in high school. That was not my story, but I moved here from Toledo, previously was from Pemberville, and I moved because I wanted my kids to go to Perrysburg
Mm.
schools. That's my big reason for coming to Perrysburg. We thought about moving to Sylvania, but we ended up moving to Perrysburg because our families are in Pemberville and Bowling Green. Last name's New Love. A lot of people know there's a real estate empire in Bowling Green. That is
Empire.
an empire.
Like that. Yep.
That is my husband's extended family, but his dad worked at LOF in Rossford. Mom worked at the Woodland Mall at Elder Beerman, opened the store, and then years later closed it when it went out of business.
There was almost a time where we were going to move to Anthony Wayne. And I try to think about like how different everything would have been. Like we had plans. I think my dad still have the blueprints for the house that we're going to build. And then luckily, before my dad gave them any money, the company went out of business or went bankrupt. So we ended up having to move to Perrysburg. Otherwise, we'd be in Monclova Township.
Yeah, good schools. I mean, that was me in 2006. We had a kid with a disability and an even younger kid that eventually would need to go to a good school. Either that or like you did earlier, we would have had to send him to a Catholic school or, something where it was a little bit better performing. Anyways, ended up in Perrysburg. And I know that people who are looking to move to Perrysburg might come upon this podcast. So what advice do you have for somebody who's possibly looking to move to Perrysburg for some reason? Like, what would you tell them is good about this town? What's in Perrysburg?
Well, I think it goes back to like people thinking it's too big because now there's a lot of stuff in Perrysburg. And I know there's some people who don't want to leave. I've had when we were looking for a house before we bought this house, I think we were staying in my in-laws basement. Either that or I think we had an apartment at one point in Perrysburg too. And anytime we would go look for a house and we were crossing the Maumee River to go into Maumee or Toledo for my mother-in-law, it was like we were in a different state. Like I understand that there's people in Perrysburg that want to be in Perrysburg and don't want to go anywhere else. And I think that's a benefit now is because it's getting seemingly bigger. There's more things here to do and, restaurants and, there's, if you have children, there's so many things that kids can get involved in too, not only through the schools, but also outside of that. There's parks everywhere. We live right down the street from Fort Imagination. So we go down there, especially now that it's all redone with the inclusive playground. So there's just and me being working in the parks, I like being outside. So there's just a lot of things to do outside. There's still, again, if you want that small town feel, go downtown and just be able to walk downtown and see all those different shops there and eat at the restaurants there. Swig is a really good restaurant down there, and Perry's Burgers is a really good place too. Like there is all these small town things too, and I think that's what's good about here is, like I said before, you can get the small town feel and still get a lot of the big city stuff too, if you're looking for kind of both of those things.
How about for somebody who just moved to town, just bought their house, they don't know where to go to church, they don't know which grocery store to go to, they don't know where to buy a winter coat. What advice would you give them about the number one thing that they need to do when they're new to town?
Because I'm a football coach, if it's fall, you got to come to a football game. Right. So if it's fall, we got a Friday night football game. I'm a varsity coach there. I've been just finished up my 5th year as a varsity coach.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I don't know if you saw, but our turf got redone about a month ago. So that was pretty exciting. We changed the logo from the P to Buzz, the actual yellow jacket with boxing gloves on. So that's in the middle of our field now. But Friday nights at home, if people, my friends came back for our 20th reunion and they came to a football game. And I told them, guys, it's completely different now. The feel, like the look, everything. It's like a small university when that stadium is packed. And if you want to get a good feel of how much support Perrysburg gives to, athletics or whatever it may be, like go to a Friday night football game, because that is a big deal. And I think we can almost be to the point where it's one of those like, hey, go downtown and grab the stuff. You can. It's Friday. Everything's shut down. It's a football game. I want to be like in one of those movies.
Like in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Friday Night Lights. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Hey, that's a good call. Friday night football games, varsity football games at the old high school, the current junior high, right?
Yeah. I don't know how many times my daughter asked me at least once a year, why is the high school stadium at the junior high? I go, well, that used to be the high school and it cost too much money to build another one and this and that. And she's, oh, okay. And then, 6 months later, she'll ask me again.
That's all right. You got the answer. When I was going to Eastwood High School, that's where I graduated from in 1996. Perrysburg High School was where that football stadium is, and things have changed. Where did you graduate from high school? I know you said Perrysburg, but the
Mhm.
old high school or the new high school?
So I spent my first 2 years at the old high school and my last 2 years at the new high school. So I got both.
Nice. What was that like going from that old building to the new building?
Really exciting. I mean, being a freshman in high school, it's nervous and exciting. You're in this new building, this big building, and you got to figure stuff out. And for me, I was a new kid in town and all this stuff, and so it was already a cool thing. But then like switching over to a completely new building, it was like you're starting high school again because it's like this new building you got to figure out and all these new things. And one thing I do remember is that the floor was not done correctly. So when we moved in, like it was all getting ripped up again in the commons area. It got ripped up and had to be redone. Which now that I've been
Oh,
through a couple of construction projects where I've seen things like that happen, that it makes sense to me. Like, yeah, well, the contractor wasn't happy, and the subcontractor who laid that floor didn't do a good job, so they had to rip it out. Me and my friends remember that. Like that was a huge thing for us. Like, what? They just spent all this money, now they're ripping up this floor. But it was cool to be a part of to say, even when you asked that question, I was excited to say, yeah, I went to school at 2 years at the old one and 2 years at the new one because I think it's a cool thing.
nice. Nice. I remember when I was graduating from high school, again, this was Eastwood. We really wanted to have one of those cool all-weather tracks. And they put it in, I think, a month after I graduated.
Oh
But
no.
you would have felt like you missed out if you would have graduated and then they would have built the high school, the new high school. So I'm
Yeah,
glad you got the best of both worlds.
you're right. You're right. And who knows? Maybe that track was the start of Eastwood being so dominant in track now. Like for years, they're so good in track.
Yeah, they were getting pretty good when I was there, especially with the girls running programs.
Yeah.
But I digress. So back to Perrysburg. Let's talk about current residents. What's something about Perrysburg that you know that current residents may not know?
I'm sure a lot of residents know about this, but because Mr. Freeze is such a big deal in Perrysburg, which I'm not going to take anything away from Mr. Freeze, like it is a big deal, and I think the only thing that can make it better is if they could take credit cards. But they do what they do. Whenever we drive past and we see that it's packed, we go to Hershey's, and Hershey's is to me is also really good. And I've coached basketball the past couple years, girls basketball at the high school. In the past 2 years, there's been girls who I coach that work at Hershey's. So it is cool to like see them in the off season too, and to just talk to them or whatever. But Hershey's is, again, I'm sure people know about it, but it is one of our things. Like sometimes we don't even think about going to Mr. Freeze. The kids want to go to Hershey's, so we'll get a couple scoops at Hershey's.
You and I have run into each other at that store too.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's where I met you in person for the first time. I've known
Mm,
about you for years because I feel like you were one of my son's bosses because he's a baseball umpire here in
correct.
town. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I finally meet you, and now you're on the Perrysburg podcast. So that's how life works in Perrysburg, small town.
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. So you're saying that the Hershey's ice cream shop, I call it Nedley's because I
Nedley's.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, I've gotten a gift card before and it said Nedley's on it. But, anyways, Hershey's, Nedley's.
Mhm.
Anyways, you're saying that that's one of the best kept secrets in Perrysburg, right?
I think so because, like I said, now we'll be eating at sidelines, and instead of going, we can go. We're pretty much in the middle. We can go either way to Mr. Freeze or Hershey's, and we decided to go to Hershey's just because it's just what we ice cream's ice cream, I think, right? But I know it's nice to sometimes get scoops of ice cream and not soft serve.
We go to all of the ice cream shops. In fact, for the Perrysburg podcast, I am planning to do a big episode where I take a microphone to
Oh,
each of the ice cream shops and I ask them, what's your favorite ice cream shop? Even if they're standing in Nedley's or Hershey's ice cream. And I ask them, and if they say, well, I really like Mr. Freeze, but the line was too long. I just want to hear what people have to say about the ice cream shops. There may be an ice cream shop in Perrysburg that I don't know about. So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing to my listeners' attention that there are
Yeah.
at least Mr. Freeze and Hershey's Nedley's ice cream.
And I know people like that other, I don't know the name of it. I haven't gone there very often, but
Twisty treat.
yeah, I think people like it because it has a drive-through, right? Yeah, I think because people will put on Facebook how they like it because it's fast and you don't have to get out of your car. So,
Oh, yeah, they have it down pat over there. They have somebody taking your order while your car is waiting in line at the drive-through. So by the time you get up to the window and pay, it's ready and they're
oh,
handing it to
nice.
you. Yeah, I think the drive-through is actually quicker than the walk-up window. We like Twisty Treat because it's kind of on our side of town. We're on the west side and we can
Okay.
ride our bikes there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Less guilt for eating the ice
Yeah,
cream.
you're exercising and yeah, I get it. Yeah. When I lived in Toledo, my dad coached my baseball team. We used to go to a place called Mr. G's Barn. It was an ice cream place. And when I moved to Perrysburg, they're like, "Oh, let's go to Mr. Freeze." I go, "You mean Mr. G's?" Like, "No, Mr. Freeze." They're the same exact ice cream place. Like, it's so spooky how similar they are. Like for the one I grew up in, and then to Mr. Freeze now, and how similar they are, and what they in. Like, it was crazy that they both exist. I know it's not super far fetched, but it's to me, especially as a kid in high school, I'm like, wait a minute, is it where am I at?
Nice. I know a Mr. G's barn, I think on McCord Road.
Yeah, yeah,
Is that
that's the
it?
one. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know that one.
They have Smurf ice cream was their big thing. It was blue ice cream.
I have not tried that yet.
All the baseball kids would get Smurf ice cream all the time.
Nice. So you were in that part of Toledo then, right?
Yes, I lived by Rogers. Yeah, by Rogers High School. Yep.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep.
Gotcha. I couldn't remember which school district was right there. I just knew it was
Yeah.
on McCord. All right. I think we covered for anybody looking to move to Perrysburg, anybody new here, and for current residents, you mentioned a little bit about what's in Perrysburg. You talked about why you like to live here, families here, great schools. What else would you like my listeners to know about Perrysburg?
I know this is audio, so I'm Hispanic, and for somebody moving to Perrysburg, I know that was the thing for my dad. I'm sure my dad thought about it because growing up when he grew up, it was a lot harder to. And I'm not trying to bring the podcast down, but it was a lot harder to be, to be different, to look different. So moving to Perrysburg, I'm sure he was aware of where he was moving his children, and obviously as kids, like he didn't say anything to us about it, but sometimes you feel it. The good thing about Perrysburg is it is really inclusive and it is getting more diverse, which I know for me and for my kids, like I like being a part of that, and I want people to embrace that. And not just because we are a minority, but because like it's important for me and it's important for the community I live in to be diverse and to be welcoming, because I don't want to live in a community where people say, well, I'm not going to go there because they're not inclusive or they don't welcome people. Like, I want to be a part of what's welcoming about Perrysburg, and the more diverse it gets, the more it is that way. And it's because of all the people that live here or are moving here. They want to make their community better, and I feel that. And being a coach in so many sports, like I talk to a lot of people and I'm involved in a lot of people, and everyone always welcomes me in. And no matter what I do and who I'm talking to, and that's what's great about Perrysburg, is that it is a, again, that small town feel where everyone wants everyone else to succeed. And just like every town, there is outliers and people that are negative or bad or whatever. That's just part of growing up. But I think overall it is a welcoming community, a community that wants everyone to succeed, wants our schools to do well, wants our athletes to do well, wants just everyone wants us to do well, and it comes out quite often.
Thank you for bringing up the inclusion piece. I have a child with a disability, and although kids don't come knocking at our door to come play with my son who has autism, I don't feel like he's been bullied as much as he may have been if he were in Toledo Public Schools, which he would have been at Start High School had we not moved. I'm not saying there's anything bad about Start High School, but there's a different kind of a student that goes to Start High School compared to the students at Perrysburg High School.
Mm.
I know that he's not a person of color, and I respect your journey. I'm sure you
Oh
respect
yeah,
mine.
yeah.
But as far as inclusion, I feel like the level of inclusion is much warmer
Mhm.
in Perrysburg than what we were experiencing in Toledo. So I'm glad you feel welcome here. I never
Yeah.
would have thought, to ask you about the experiences that you have had as a person of color in Perrysburg, but thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Everyone's welcome.
That's why I like it here. And I never once thought like, oh, my kids, I'm gonna have to talk to my kids about certain things or this or that. And every once in a while, especially when they were younger, because when they're 6 or 7, kids will just say something, and then my kids come home with a question. They're like, well, he said my skin was darker than his skin. They're like, well, it is. That's just, and here's why it is. And there's nothing wrong with it. He or she was just saying this about you, and that's it, and okay, they're 7 and they'll go off and forget about the conversation we've had anyway. But you know, but it's beyond those young ages when you get worried as a parent, and not just a person of color, but anything, any person when they get older, like, all right, well, who's going to say what are they going to do, this and that, and if there is issues, especially in the schools, they're pretty as far as the cases I've dealt with or seen, especially as a coach, like they're pretty on top of stuff. And because they have to be, everyone's held accountable here, and we need to be, to make sure we stay at the level that we want to be, or that we think we should be.
Excellent comments. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about when it comes to Perrysburg? What's in Perrysburg? Why people like to live here before we wrap this up?
One more thing, and I don't want to turn it into an ad for Big Daddy Graphics, but that is one of my favorite places to go, by the way. Big Daddy Graphics, if you don't know, it's a bright pink building. It's in an alley off 2nd Street.
Burlingwood Drive, I believe, is the name of the road.
Okay.
Burlingwood.
Yeah, you can get it off of 2nd and River, I think, too, River Road, or whatever Front Street is. I forget what that road's called, but it's run by Mindy and Rex, and sometimes I'll go in there just to chit chat with them, because but they always have cool stuff. They can get you whatever you want. I brought stuff in there that I had already, and they were able to embroider it or put a patch on or this or that. But it's one of my favorite places to go. And I usually buy Christmas presents from there. In fact, I got to go tomorrow and get some Christmas presents for my buddy down in Texas. His sister asked me to get him some shirts. So I got to go in there tomorrow. But it's just, like I said, I don't want to turn it to an ad, but it's such a cool place. And they're very well known, but I just, want them to put out there.
Yeah. Hey, if anybody's looking to visit Perrysburg, check out Big Daddy Graphics. You can get some Perrysburg gear.
Yeah. Not even like sports stuff. They got like city stuff. They got, even if you're not into sports, they got all kinds of Perrysburg stuff.
Yes. And they used to have this giant German Shepherd that was a shop dog. That's what I call it, a shop dog. The German Shepherd would walk around, not a very big shop, but he would walk around and he'd greet people. He was great. His name was Gator. He was a good guy. But yeah, God bless Gator. Rest in
Another
peace.
dog now. Yeah.
Did they get a new one?
Yeah. I think, because I know one of their sons got a black lab, and then I thought they had, I can't remember. I thought there was a couple at some point running, but they do have another dog, another shop dog. Yeah.
That'll get me in there sooner. I haven't been in there for a couple of months. I'm going to have to go see the new dog.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Mindy usually helps me out. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And hey, I will put in the show notes, I will put the Nerdball podcast and the three dads. Is that what it was called? The Three Dads podcast?
3 different dads.
3 different dads podcast.
Yep.
Perrysburg schools, all kinds of things. Is there anything else you want to share before we close this out?
I don't think so. It was, first of all, thanks for having me on. It was really fun. Like I said at the beginning, it's cool to be on the other side, like talking, and I talk a lot. So I guess that's what's good about podcasting is, I can fill that void if there is any. But it was a lot of fun. I appreciate you asking me to come on.
It's been my pleasure. Lorenzo, take care. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks again to Lorenzo Melchor for being my guest today. I enjoyed hearing about his 2 podcasts, the Nerdball Podcast and the 3 Different Dads podcast, what brought him to Perrysburg twice, once when he was younger and once when he had a family, why he likes living here, and more. If you are interested in being on the Perrysburg podcast, doing this sort of an interview like Lorenzo did, talking about what brought you to town, why you like living here, and what prospective new and current residents should know about Perrysburg, I want you to contact me at perrysburgpodcast@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'm looking for future guests. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Perrysburg Podcast. This has been episode 24. Please visit perrysburgpodcast.com to read the show notes. In the show notes, you'll find a link to the Nerdball Podcast, Three Different Dads Podcast, Perrysburg Schools, Big Daddy Graphics, a list of the ice cream shops in Perrysburg that we talked about, Nedley's, otherwise known as Hershey's, Mr. Freeze, and Twisty Treat, and more. I'll have all those links and more on perrysburgpodcast.com. If you know someone who might like this episode, please share it with them. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe to or follow the Perrysburg Podcast on your favorite podcast player and YouTube to get each new episode right when it comes out. Thanks again for listening today. I'll be back next Friday with a new episode.